Now we'd like to have Mr. Vanden Bossche come and wrap up this topic.
So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So after the experience of charging in Japan with DC, I will speak a bit about AC charging and more in particular, what's happening in Europe about AC charging. In fact, AC is what comes out of your outlet. It's what is the way that electric power is generally distributed. And the most common way to distribute that AC power is to use a three-phase network, 400 volt between phases, and 230 between the phase and the neutral, so this is what you get on a normal power outlet. In some other countries, another variant is used, where you have only 3 wires with then 230 volts between the phases. This is generally every distribution transformer is 3-phase, and 3-phase goes into every house. But whether individual customers get 3-phase, it depends on the country. In France, it's not so likely. In Switzerland, everybody gets it. But in general, it's everyone in between, and there's a large potential for 3-phase in Europe. This is a contrast with what's, for example, happening in North America, where a typical distribution transformer is single-phase with a middle outlet, so you have 2 ways to get 120 volt and 1 to 40 volt, so it's still single-phase. I don't know I'm not acquainted with what's the situation in Asian countries, but clearly there's a difference here between continental systems, mostly based on tradition. What's now the advantage of the AC charging, what power level you can get, and what's the advantage of 3-phase? In this table, we see some typical nominal currents, the power you can get out of it, and then the so-called charge speed. Charge speed is not a real speed at all because your vehicle is standing still, but it's the amount of distance, the amount of kilometer you can get while charging for 1 hour. And a basic standard outlet just gives you about 15, it's 16 amp. You can get a bit more, of course, if you increase the current. But if you go to 3-phase, you see with only 16 amp, which are just 3 tiny wires of 2.5 millimeters, you already get 11 kilowatt. And you, to get this 11 kilowatt with single phase or DC, you would need 50 or 60 amps, so you would need a lot more copper, and your infrastructure would be more heavier and more expensive. And that's the main advantage of using 3-phase for charging. As you see, you can even for higher currents, if you go to 63 amp, you can get 43 kilowatt, which is already pretty fast charging, but still with a reasonable current. That means you have a potential also for fast charging with AC, which of course has you don't need the very heavy charging stations for DC. Of course, the vehicle must be able to do it, but if your vehicle has an AC drive, as most vehicles do, this can easily be, or quite easily be converted to use as a battery charging, because they do already the same when braking. And another point is that with very big fixed infrastructure, you have very big cables attached to the infrastructure, which in some countries have a big risk to be stolen. However, it's a general view that the really fast charge will not be used the most. These are some data from EDF, so the main electricity company in France, who say that 95% of all charge will be done mostly overnight at standard outlets at a slow or medium rate, so up to about, let's say, 6 kilowatt, while fast charge will be quite limited in role. So that means that the fast charge can be DC or AC, but all this is AC charging. And for this AC charging, of course, you need suitable accessories, you need the right plugs and sockets to be used. And now international standard organizations are working to define plug and sockets for electric vehicles. This standard is specifically about those plugs and sockets. There's a type 1, which is a type which was developed for the US and Japan vehicles. It's mostly the SAE 7072 type. But since there was in Europe a demand for 3-phase accessories, there were 2 3-phase accessories being proposed. This one, what I call type 2, from German origin, and this type 3, it's from an Italian origin. Why 2? Because there's a difference. This is IPX6B, This is D, so this has safety shutters, this has not. And there's now some discussions also, not so much based on the real needs for safety, but also based on the national regulations and the national traditions of each country, which of those plugs can be used. But of course, there's a lot of confusion about this. And for this reason, there's another initiative which was done by the EU. And in fact, the European Commission, which actually is the executive branch of the European Union, has given a mandate to the European standard organizations, which are CEN and CENELEC, who are dependents of ISO and IEC on a global level. And they want to come that there be an interoperability and connectivity for off and onboard charging in all states, what basically means there should be one common plug and socket for Europe. Also, it should take into account the smart charging, because especially if you go to charge with higher power, smart charging and smart grid becomes an issue. And also safety and EMC has to be taken into account, taking into account also of the typical European directives that rule those things. And following this mandate, the standard organization have set up a focus group with a number of project teams that are now in this time there. Earlier this week, that group has met in Brussels, and they're working by next year, so early next year, they should make a recommendation to the EU on all aspects of safety, standardization and infrastructure for charging of electric vehicles. If we come now to a conclusion, because I was try to be quite fast, because that you don't have to run around with your cheat anymore this time. So in fact, it's clear that for most, at least with European situations, most charging will be done by AC, overnight charging with limited power, and even a semi-fast charge of, let's say, up to 10 kilowatts can be done with 3 times 16 ampere, which is a power that everybody or nearly everybody can be easily available. If you have an electric range in your kitchen, it will also take the same amount of power. So this is typically a power which can be implemented on a wide scale without too much problems. And this gives you semi-fast charging, which is already pretty good for most vehicles. However, DC charging will still be considered, but as a complementary role for limited use. And there we come also to exactly the same conclusions than was said by the former speaker from Japan, that it's the DC chargers or the availability of the DC chargers give a psychologically advantage. So that means that people will be more likely to fully use the capacity of their battery. So we believe that actually a limited number of DC chargers should be available, will be used, but the bulk of the charge will be done by AC from the electric grid using low to intermediate power levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van der Bossche.